I'm sure as everyone knows, there are two ways of resolving this. There's a number of ways of resolving this dispute, but legal terms, there's the court or there's arbitration. So what are the pros and cons of one versus the other?
That's a loaded question. There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons for both, but I mean, the first place you would look is the contract, right? You can't just go to the courts if you have an arbitration clause in your contract, and you can't go to the courts if you can't go to arbitration if you didn't agree to the courts. But let's put that aside. But if we're talking about just pros and cons in general, I mean, the courts here can be very cheap. They can be they can get you a result a lot faster. There might be some mechanisms within the court that allow you to get something pretty quickly within a month. Thinking about the payment order process. It also depends on the type of claim you have, right? If your contract mandates the court, then, in it's an outstanding debt, for example, you can go to the courts and probably get a payment order out of that and get a judgment in about a month. But if you're dealing with just a regular construction claim, the court process can probably take, at least the first instance, will probably take about 6-7 months. And there's a process of appeal for another 3-4 months, and then you go to the cassation court. If it goes that far, you're looking at another 3-4 months, and then the case is finally resolved. You'll have a judgment in hand, and you can go and execute. Arbitration, on the other hand, can be a little longer. Michael said 12 to 18 months, depending who the parties are, who the lawyers are. The arbitration can go a lot longer than that. I've been involved in arbitrations that were only $1 million dirhams dispute, and we dragged it out for 26 months, just to give you an idea. And along with extending that comes the costs, right? The arbitration fees for DIAC, ICC, ADCAC, which is out in Abu Dhabi, DFCLCIA, can be pretty pricey compared to the courts. On average, you're registering the case somewhere between 5,000 dirhams to 10,000 dirhams, and then you have to pay the arbitrator fees. And that's all evaluated determined based on the size of claim that you have. So if it's a big claim, price goes up. If it's a small claim, price comes down. In the courts, that's a bit different. You're actually capped, depending on the emirate that you're bringing the suit in, you're capped at 40,000 dirhams usually. It just depends on the emirate. So if you have let's say hypothetically $1 billion dirham claim, you're only paying 40,000 dirhams for it to be heard in the first instance, versus arbitration that will probably be somewhere, depending on the arbitration center, you're looking at maybe $1 million plus just to pay for the arbitration fees. But there's also the other thing with the courts and arbitration is that you get in the courts a judge who is not necessarily someone who's experienced in construction issues or has understanding of construction issues. They're really heavily dependent on an expert. In arbitration, you actually get to select your arbitrators and you get to select experts in the construction field, sure, which makes things go a lot faster and more cost effective to some extent. But the other big thing is that in the courts versus arbitration, in the courts, you don't get your lawyer fees. In the arbitration, you do get your lawyer fees. So you are going through this entire giant process and the fees get racked up. But if you come out with a successful outcome, the tribunal sees your way, gives you an arbitral award in your favor, there's a good chance that you'll probably get not the full amount. It's usually between 40% to 70% of your legal fees. So you get that back. The courts, no, you don't get that back.